Guys, this story starts very dark, but wait till humans finally answer that old signal. This one gets crazy.
The first refugee carrier died without an explosion. One moment it was there, limping through the debris storms with half its engines burning blue-white against the dark, and the next it simply vanished from every tactical screen in the convoy. No fireball, no distress signal, no debris, just an empty patch of void where 20,000 civilians had existed 3 seconds earlier. Commander Lyra Vey stared at the blank section of a display as silence spread across the bridge of the evacuation flagship Mercy of Talren like freezing water. "What destroyed it?" someone whispered behind her. No one answered because every sensor array insisted the same impossible thing. Nothing had fired. Outside the armored viewports, the stellar graveyard of Khepri Drift twisted in cold silence around the convoy. Broken moons drifted like shattered teeth through rivers of glowing dust. Ancient wrecks floated between gravity fractures left behind by wars so old that no living civilization remembered who had fought them. It was the perfect hiding place for refugees. It was also the perfect killing ground. Another alarm erupted across the bridge. Enemy advance accelerating. The tactical display bloomed crimson as a pursuing fleet emerged from the electromagnetic storms behind them. 31 warships, black-hulled and spear-shaped, cutting through the debris field with terrifying precision. Their formation never broke. Their engines never flared unevenly. They moved like executioners walking toward prisoners already tied to the wall. The Vorak Dominion had chased a convoy across 4 systems without negotiation, without demands, without even a performance of diplomacy. At first, the refugees believed the Dominion wanted the supply vaults aboard the convoy. Then they believed the enemy wanted political leverage. Now everyone understood the truth. This was extermination. Distance. Lyra asked quietly. 8 minutes until weapons range. Too fast. Far too fast. The Mercy of Talren shuddered as overloaded engines screamed beneath the deck plating. Around it drifted 200 civilian vessels held together by emergency welds, stripped reactors, and desperation. Families from burning colony worlds packed every corridor. Children slept beside ammunition crates. Medics performed surgeries in cargo bays because the hospital ships were already full. And every allied government within transmission range had refused to answer their calls. Not delayed. Not denied. Ignored. Lyra's throat tightened as another encrypted request vanished into silent space. 27 distress signals over 6 days. No response from the core systems. No response from the trade alliances. No response from the defense coalitions who had once sworn mutual protection treaties with Talren space. The galaxy had already decided these people were dead. Then the lights flickered. Every display on the bridge froze simultaneously. For one terrible second, Lyra thought the flagship had finally lost power. But the engine vibrations were still there beneath her boots. The life support indicators still glowed. Only the navigation systems had stopped. A low mechanical tone rolled through the command deck. Not an alarm, a recognition signal. The bridge crew exchanged uneasy looks as lines of ancient text suddenly began appearing across every monitor in a language nobody on board had spoken in over 3 centuries. "Commander," her communications officer breathed. I think the ship is accessing archival systems." "That's impossible. Those databases were stripped generations ago." Another line appeared, then another, until the entire tactical screen went black except for a single sentence glowing in pale white letters at its center. Jurisdictional claim recognized. Emergency protection protocol active. Before anyone could speak, the convoy's oldest navigation beacon, a device so outdated it had long ago become ceremonial, activated on its own for the first time in living memory. And across the void, the advancing enemy fleet abruptly stopped. For several seconds, nobody on the bridge of the Mercy of Talren moved. The Vorak fleet remained frozen against the backdrop of shattered moons and drifting wreckage, their formations suddenly motionless in the middle of a killing approach that had never once slowed before. 31 warships hung in the void like dark blades suspended over her throat. Commander Lyra Vey did not trust it. "Are they charging weapons?" she asked. Her tactical officer swallowed hard while scanning the display. "Yes, but no targeting locks." "That makes no sense." Nothing about the situation made sense anymore. The emergency beacon continued pulsing beneath the deck, sending out slow, rhythmic bursts through frequencies so ancient most modern systems no longer monitored them. Lyra could actually hear the old transmitter vibrating through the hull plating, a mechanical heartbeat echoing from another age. The bridge lights dimmed once before stabilizing again. Then a new transmission appeared on the central display, notifying claim authority. Please maintain civilian identification signals. A chill passed through the room. Claim authority, one of the navigation crew repeated quietly. What authority? No one answered because no one truly knew. The oldest surviving star charts occasionally reference protected transit lanes once maintained by extinct powers, but most historians dismiss them as relics from the chaotic centuries after collapsed wars. Half the galaxy's records from that era had been destroyed. The other half contradicted each other. But there was one name that appeared repeatedly in forbidden military archives and fragmented frontier myths. Humanity. Lyra had spent most of her career believing humans were either extinct or isolationist ghosts hiding beyond map space. Every academy instructor taught the same thing. Humans had withdrawn from galactic affairs generations ago after a series of catastrophic conflicts nobody fully understood anymore. Yet traders still told stories. Stories about warships arriving where massacres were already underway. Stories about pirate fleets disappearing after attacking civilian convoys. Stories about ancient rescue laws older than modern governments. Most people laughed at those stories. The Vorak Dominion clearly did not. On the tactical display, several enemy vessels were now shifting formation defensively instead of offensively. Tight military bursts flashed between their ships in encrypted patterns, so rapid the convoy systems could barely track them. "They are arguing," the communications officer whispered. Lyra narrowed her eyes. "Can you decrypt it?" "No. Commander, but they sound nervous." That was the part she could not reconcile. The Vorak Dominion did not fear anyone. For 15 years they had expanded across border systems with ruthless certainty, crushing resistance fleets larger than the refugee convoy a dozen times over. Entire colonies surrendered at the mere sight of Vorak war banners entering orbit. Yet now those same warships sat motionless because an obsolete beacon had activated. A sharp burst of static suddenly tore through the bridge speakers. Then a voice emerged. Cold, metallic, controlled. Refugee Convoy Talren 7. The translated transmission said, "Deactivate your unidentified signal immediately." Every head on the bridge snapped toward the speakers. Lyra stepped toward the command console. "This is Commander Lyra Vey of the Talren Civilian Evacuation Fleet. State your intent." A pause followed. Then the voice returned. "Harsher now. You are operating inside restricted jurisdiction." A murmur spread across the bridge. Restricted jurisdiction? In whose jurisdiction? Lyra demanded. The silence that followed lasted just slightly too long. Then the Vorak commander answered with visible reluctance. Human territorial claim. The bridge went completely still. One of the younger officers actually laughed under his breath in disbelief. "That's impossible. Humans haven't controlled this region in centuries." "Negative." The Vorak commander replied immediately. "Claim markers remain legally active." Legally active. The phrase landed strangely, as if even now, after centuries of silence, certain laws still mattered enough to terrify an active war fleet. Another officer leaned toward Lyra and lowered his voice. "Commander, if humans really maintain jurisdiction here, why hasn't anyone seen them?" Before she could answer, the tactical display suddenly flashed red. One of the Vorak destroyers had broken formation. Its engines ignited hard as a vessel accelerated directly toward the convoy. "Unauthorized advance detected," the navigation officer warned. The enemy commander's voice erupted instantly across open channels. "Vessel Caros, hold position immediately." The destroyer ignored the order. Its forward weapons began charging. "They are going to test it," Lyra realized softly. The bridge crew watched in breathless silence as a destroyer cut through the debris field toward the helpless convoy. The distance closed rapidly. 7 minutes. 6. Then 5. No human ships appeared. No defense systems activated. Nothing happened. Several Vorak ships began retreating backward. Others maintained distance as though preparing for impact. But the destroyer kept advancing. "Commander," the communications officer whispered shakily, "I think they believe something's coming." The destroyer entered firing range. Its weapon arrays ignited bright blue. And vanished. Not exploded. Vanished. One frame it existed. The next, it was simply gone, erased so completely that even residual heat signatures disappeared with it. No shockwave, no debris, no weapons discharge, just absence. The entire bridge stared at the empty void where a warship had ceased to exist. Then every speaker aboard the convoy crackled alive simultaneously. A calm voice spoke across the ancient emergency frequency. Civilian casualty probability acknowledged. The voice paused, then continued with terrifying clarity. Human intervention authority is now active.
Okay, now this is crazy. Human did not even sound angry.
No one on the mercy of Talren breathed for several seconds after the transmission ended. The calmness of the voice disturbed Commander Lyra Vey more than the disappearance of the destroyer. There had been no anger in it, no threat, no dramatic declaration of war, just procedure, as if the erasure of an armed battleship was not extraordinary enough to deserve emotion. Around her, the bridge crew stared at their consoles with the pale expressions of people realizing the universe had suddenly become stranger than they were prepared for. Outside the armored viewports, the stellar graveyard remained dark and silent except for drifting debris and the frozen Vorak fleet still suspended across the void. Then a proximity alarm screamed. Contact! The tactical display flared white. A single ship had appeared less than 3,000 kilometers from the convoy. Half the bridge recoiled instinctively. No hyperspace rupture detected. The sensor officer said, voice climbing in panic. No gravitational displacement. It wasn't there, and now it is. Lyra stared at the new contact. At first glance, the vessel seemed oddly unimpressive. It was smaller than most Vorak cruisers, narrow through the center with an asymmetrical hull that looked more functional than elegant. Dark armored plating covered most of its surface, interrupted only by scattered bands of dull white light running along the spine like restrained lightning beneath metal skin. But something about it felt wrong. Not damaged, not primitive. Controlled. The ship drifted beside the convoy without broadcasting military signatures or target locks. Even its engine emissions were strangely muted, as though the vessel actively disliked being noticed. Then the identification tag finally appeared. HSV Blackwatch. Status: Civilian Response Authority. The bridge exchanged confused looks. Civilian, someone whispered. That's not a warship designation, another officer muttered. Lyra frowned harder. Every instinct she possessed told her the vessel absolutely was a warship, not because of visible weapons. In fact, the Blackwatch carried remarkably little exposed armament for a ship facing an entire enemy fleet. No, the danger came from something harder to explain. Confidence. The vessel floated in front of 30 heavily armed Vorak ships with the relaxed stillness of something that did not consider itself endangered. A new transmission arrived immediately. This is Human Systems Vessel Blackwatch, the same calm voice said. Refugee Convoy Talren 7. Maintain current civilian formation. Medical extraction routes are being calculated. Lyra blinked. Medical extraction? The enemy fleet was still surrounding them. Before she could respond, another transmission burst violently across local channels. The Vorak commander. Human vessel, you are interfering in sovereign Dominion enforcement operations. The Blackwatch answered instantly. No sovereign authority exists during civilian extermination events. The reply was so immediate, so matter-of-fact, that it sounded rehearsed, ancient, like a law repeated too many times to require thought anymore. The Vorak commander's tone sharpened. Withdraw immediately or your vessel will be destroyed. For the first time, the human voice changed slightly. Not fear, confusion. Destroyed. The speaker repeated softly, as though genuinely trying to understand the logic behind the statement. A strange silence followed. Then the Blackwatch transmitted a single sentence. You continued advancing after jurisdiction warning. The tactical display exploded with motion. 5 Vorak attack craft surged forward simultaneously, engines burning hard as they broke formation around the convoy. Weapons ignited across their hulls in overlapping patterns designed to overwhelm shields through saturation fire. The bridge crew tensed instinctively. The Blackwatch did not move. Are they insane? One officer whispered. The attack craft opened fire. Bright streams of plasma ripped across the void toward the lone human vessel, and curved sideways. Every shot bent violently off trajectory mid-flight, as though space itself had twisted around the Blackwatch. Several plasma bolts slammed directly into nearby wreckage fields while others spiraled harmlessly into darkness. The Vorak ships immediately attempted correction. Too slow. The Blackwatch accelerated. Not forward. Sideways. The human vessel shifted position so violently that Lyra's eyes lost track of it entirely for half a second. One moment it floated beside the convoy. The next it stood inside the enemy formation. No engine flare. No visible thrust. Just impossible movement. What did it do? The sensor officer gasped. I don't know. The first Vorak attack craft tried to turn. A thin white beam flashed once from the Blackwatch. The craft's engines died instantly. Not exploded. Disabled. The second attack craft lost weapons control a heartbeat later. The third spun helplessly as its guidance system collapsed completely. The remaining two attempted retreat. Their drives shut down simultaneously. Across the tactical display, 5 enemy vessels now drifted powerless through the debris field without a single casualty inflicted. Lyra felt unease creep slowly beneath her ribs. The humans were not fighting to destroy. They were dismantling. Methodically. Precisely. As though killing was unnecessary extra effort. The Vorak fleet seemed to realize it too. Enemy formations immediately widened, ships creating distance from one another in abrupt defensive maneuvers. Several vessels began powering heavy weapons, while others repositioned toward escape vectors rather than attack positions. They escaped, the communications officer whispered. Lyra barely heard him. Her attention remained fixed on the Blackwatch. A maintenance panel had opened briefly along the vessel's hull during the engagement, exposing rows of compact armored cylinders beneath the plating before sealing shut again. Escape pods? No. Boarding craft. But if the humans intended rescue operations, why bring assault deployment systems? As if hearing the thought itself, the human voice returned calmly over the convoy frequency. Commander Lyra Vey, your civilian vessels are critically overloaded and structurally unstable. Lyra stepped toward the transmitter cautiously. You know my name. We know everyone aboard. Something about the answer chilled the room. Before Lyra could respond, the human continued. You have approximately 21 minutes before the Dominion fleet resumes aggressive action despite projected losses. The Vorak commander instantly interrupted. You cannot hold this sector alone. For the first time, the human voice carried the faintest trace of emotion. Not anger, not arrogance. Certainty. We are not alone, the Blackwatch replied.
Bro, something big is coming from that dark zone. I can feel it.
Then long-range sensors detected movement deep inside the stellar graveyard. Something enormous had just awakened in the dark. At first, the long-range contacts looked like sensor ghosts. Faint distortions flickered deep within the wreck field beyond Khepri Drift, hidden between shattered moons and drifting carcasses of ancient warships. The tactical systems aboard the Mercy of Talren struggled to lock onto them properly. Shapes appeared for less than a second before dissolving again into static. But the Vorak fleet reacted instantly. Their formation broke, not into attack posture, retreat posture. Several Dominion cruisers pulled backward at full thrust while encrypted command traffic exploded across every frequency band. For the first time since the pursuit began, the enemy ships no longer looked like hunters controlling an execution. They looked trapped. What are they seeing? Lyra whispered. No one answered because nobody aboard the convoy understood the readings appearing across their screens. The distortions were growing larger, not approaching, activating. Ancient wreckage buried inside the stellar graveyard was beginning to move. A low vibration rolled through the Mercy of Talren as emergency lights shifted from red to pale white throughout the ship. Across the convoy, civilian systems were suddenly synchronizing automatically with the ancient jurisdiction beacon still pulsing beneath the hull. Then the Blackwatch transmitted again. All civilian vessels prepare for stabilization docking. Lyra frowned. Docking with what? The answer arrived seconds later. One of the dead moons split open. Not exploded. Opened. An enormous structure unfolded from beneath kilometers of rock and frozen debris, shedding ancient camouflage plating into space as colossal white lights ignited across its surface one after another. Gasps spread across the bridge as a hidden installation slowly emerged from the moon's hollow core. It was not a station. It was a shipyard. Massive docking arms rotated outward through clouds of drifting stone while buried reactor systems roared back to life for the first time in centuries. Rows of dormant defense cannons tracked awake in perfect synchronization, their surfaces scarred by age but unmistakably functional. Ancient human symbols burn along the structure's spine in faded silver. Refuge or Authority Node 14. The entire bridge stayed in stunned silence. Humans hid this here, one officer breathed. No, Lyra murmured slowly, her eyes fixed on the scale of the installation. They buried it waiting for something.
Man, humans were ready for this long before anyone knew.
The Vorak commander apparently reached the same conclusion. All Dominion forces, the enemy voice barked across open channels, stripped now of its earlier composure. Destroy the beacon network immediately. The fleet surged forward. This time there was no hesitation, no cautious testing. The Dominion warships opened fire together in a devastating wave of plasma and kinetic bombardment aimed directly at the awakening shipyard. And the graveyard answered. Thousands of defense signatures erupted simultaneously across Khepri Drift. Hidden weapons platforms emerged from drifting wreckage. Ancient satellites ignited beneath debris clouds. Long-dead warships embedded inside shattered asteroids suddenly powered active targeting arrays. The entire graveyard had been armed. The first Vorak cruiser died instantly. A rail round the size of a transport shuttle punched through its center mass at relativistic speed, tearing the vessel apart so violently that the expanding debris cloud erased two nearby attack craft seconds later. Another cruiser vanished beneath converging beam fire from 6 different hidden batteries. Then the Black Watch moved again. The human vessel accelerated directly into the middle of the Dominion advance, sliding between incoming fire with impossible precision, while releasing waves of compact drones from beneath its hull. At first, Lyra assumed they were combat systems. Then magnified visuals reached the bridge. The drones were carrying medical supplies, repair equipment, emergency atmosphere generators. They are resupplying the convoy during combat, the tactical officer said incredulously. The Black Watch ignored enemy fire completely while drones attached themselves across damaged refugee vessels one after another. Hull breaches sealed. Life support systems restarted. Several drifting transports regained engine power for the first time in days. Humanity was fighting a fleet and running disaster relief operations simultaneously. The contrast felt almost unreal. Then Lyra saw the first human boarding teams. Armored craft launched from hidden sections of the Black Watch and slammed into damaged civilian ships throughout the convoy. The soldiers emerging from them did not move like conquerors or elite ceremonial troops. They moved like emergency responders entering a burning building. Fast, focused, purposeful. One live feed opened automatically on the Moses Bridge, showing human personnel forcing open collapsed bulkheads aboard a refugee transport while terrified civilians watched in disbelief. Medical triage first. A human voice ordered calmly over the feed. Move children away from pressure fractures. Engineering teams. Stabilize decks 3 through 6 before reactor collapse. No speeches. No dramatic reassurances. Just immediate action. Another feed appeared. Human Marines carrying wounded civilians through smoke-filled corridors while combat alarms screamed overhead. Another. A human engineer manually welding structural supports beside exhausted Talren mechanics. Another. A human medic kneeling beside an injured refugee child, removing their own oxygen mask long enough to calm her before continuing treatment. The bridge of the mercy of Talren fell quiet. The humans did not behave like myths. They behaved like people who had done this too many times before. Then the Dominion fleet changed tactics. They are targeting the civilians, Lyra realized in horror. Several Vorak destroyers abruptly ignored the human defenses entirely and accelerated straight toward the densest refugee clusters. Their weapons began charging not for precision strikes, but wide-area extermination fire. The Black Watch transmitted immediately. Its calm voice had vanished. Dominion vessels, the human speaker said quietly, you are now under extinction-level violation review. Something about the wording made Lyra's blood run cold. Not because it sounded emotional, because it sounded official, as though some ancient line had finally been crossed. Then every hidden installation inside Khepri Drift powered fully online at once. And somewhere deep inside the graveyard, something vastly larger than the Black Watch began moving toward the battlefield. The thing emerging from the depths of Khepri Drift was so large that the convoy's sensors initially categorized it as terrain. Entire debris clouds shifted around its silhouette as buried engines awakened beneath layers of wreckage accumulated over centuries. Ancient metal peeled away from its surface in continent-sized sheets while reactor signatures climbed higher and higher across every tactical display aboard the Mercy of Talren. The Vorak fleet immediately attempted retreat. Not tactical repositioning. Retreat. Several Dominion ships broke formation completely and accelerated toward jump distance without waiting for command authorization. Others began broadcasting frantic encrypted signals into deep space. Commander Lyra Vey stared at the growing contact in disbelief. Why are they this afraid? No one on the bridge answered because the ship emerging from the graveyard did not resemble anything built by modern civilizations. It looked older, heavier, purpose-built for an era when survival itself had apparently required monstrous things. The vessel slowly rotated through drifting debris, revealing an armored hull covered in scars that had never been repaired. Entire sections bore visible damage from impacts large enough to cripple normal warships, yet the ship still moved with horrifying certainty. Then its designation appeared: HFY Judicator. Classification: Response Carrier. Below it, another line followed: First contact restriction suspended. One of the refugee officers frowned. What does that mean? Lyra never answered because a new transmission interrupted the bridge before she could think. The human voice aboard the Black Watch had changed again. Still calm, but colder now. Dominion command vessel, it said. Historical archive confirmation complete. Silence answered. Then the Vorak commander spoke carefully for the first time since entering the system. You have no jurisdiction here. The response came instantly. You exterminated Colony Epsilon 9. The bridge went still. Lyra felt something tighten inside her chest. The Black Watch continued before anyone could speak. You targeted civilian evacuation corridors during active surrender negotiations. You sterilized atmospheric shelters after compliance was achieved. You erased biometric records to prevent survivor identification. Each sentence landed harder than the last. Around the convoy, even the refugees monitoring public channels had fallen silent, because the human voice was not accusing. It was reciting evidence. The Vorak commander finally answered. That colony was destroyed over 2 centuries ago. Yes, the Black Watch replied. We know. A strange feeling spread slowly across the bridge. Not fear, understanding. The humans had not arrived because of the convoy. The convoy had activated something much older. Another transmission burst violently across local channels before Lyra could process the thought. This time it came from the massive response carrier emerging behind the debris field. The voice sounded different from the Black Watch. Deeper, ancient. Dominion military authority has been suspended pending civilian extinction review. The words echoed through every active system aboard the convoy. Then came the sentence that changed the atmosphere of the entire battlefield. Judgment protocols are now authorized.
One, the aliens know they made a huge mistake.
Several Vorak ships opened fire instantly, not at the convoy, at the response carrier. The barrage was catastrophic. Heavy plasma batteries, spinal lancers, missile clouds, kinetic strikes, enough concentrated firepower to annihilate cities, crossed the void together toward the awakening human vessel. The Judicator did not evade. Massive shield layers ignited around the carrier in geometric patterns unlike anything Lyra had ever seen. Instead of absorbing the barrage normally, the shields fractured the incoming fire apart into cascading streams of redirected energy that bent outward across space. One Vorak cruiser accidentally destroyed itself with its own reflected bombardment. Then the carrier answered. No dramatic superweapon fired. No enormous beam split the darkness. Instead, dozens of smaller human ships detached from hidden bays across the carrier's hull and accelerated outward in perfect formation. Rescue ships, hospital frigates, interceptors, engineering craft, warships, all moving simultaneously. The horrifying realization hit Lyra all at once. This was not a military fleet. It was an emergency response system. A civilization had weaponized rescue itself. Across the battlefield, human vessels moved with terrifying coordination. Some engaged Dominion ships directly, while others continued stabilizing refugee transports and evacuating wounded civilians from collapsing decks. One human cruiser physically positioned itself between incoming fire and a disabled refugee ship without hesitation, taking the impact across its own shields while medical craft completed extraction operations. Another launched boarding teams directly into burning civilian corridors before returning fire on attacking destroyers. Human priorities never shifted. Protect civilians first. Everything else second. The Vorak commander finally sounded afraid. You mobilize an entire carrier group over one refugee convoy. The Black Watch answered calmly. You targeted surrendered civilians. That was centuries ago. No, the human voice replied. It is still happening now. The battlefield suddenly darkened. At first, Lyra thought power had failed again. Then she realized the stars themselves were disappearing behind enormous objects emerging from hidden positions throughout Khepri Drift. More human ships. Dozens of them. Ancient stations hidden inside shattered asteroids activated across the system, while dormant relay towers began transmitting massive encrypted bursts into deep space. The tactical officer looked physically ill. Commander, those aren't local reinforcements. Then what are they? The officer swallowed. I think they are waking up the network. As if confirming the statement, thousands of dormant signals suddenly ignited beyond the system, across neighboring sectors, across forgotten territories, across regions of space the galaxy believed abandoned. Ancient human infrastructure was coming online, and judging by the reaction of the Dominion fleet, this was the exact thing they had spent centuries praying would never happen again. Then a final transmission arrived from the Judicator. Quiet. Absolute. Civilian extermination event confirmed. A pause followed. Then the ancient carrier spoke words that made even the humans aboard nearby rescue craft fall silent. Humanity has returned to active jurisdiction. The moment the transmission spread beyond Khepri Drift, the galaxy changed. Not symbolically, literally. Across hundreds of systems, ancient communication relays dormant for generations abruptly activated on forgotten moons, buried stations, and drifting satellites hidden beneath civilian infrastructure. Deep space observatories began receiving encrypted human signals on channels older than modern governments. Trade networks collapsed under waves of emergency traffic as fragmented reports flooded public systems simultaneously. Humanity has returned to active jurisdiction.
That line gave me chills. Humanity is fully back now.
At first, most civilizations believed it was misinformation. Then entire Dominion fleets started disappearing. Not destroyed in glorious battles. Disconnected. Long-range military channels across border sectors went silent one after another as hidden human interdiction arrays activated deep inside hyperspace lanes. Vorak warships attempting emergency jumps emerged into dead zones where navigation systems failed and communications vanished entirely. The Dominion was being isolated, system by system, fleet by fleet, like prey cut away from the herd before the kill. Inside Khepri Drift, Commander Lyra Vey watched the battlefield spiral into controlled chaos around the convoy. The Judicator continued advancing through the debris field with terrible patience while smaller human vessels spread outward in disciplined waves. And somehow, amid all of it, the rescue operations never slowed. That was the part her mind struggled to process. Humans fought like they had accepted violence as unavoidable long ago, yet every tactical decision still revolved around protecting civilians first. Their warships intercepted incoming fire intended for refugee transports without hesitation. Human engineers crossed open vacuum between damaged ships carrying emergency seal foam and portable reactors while combat raged around them. One medical frigate actually rammed a disabled civilian carrier sideways out of a Dominion firing lane before deploying triage teams into the breached sections. Why are they risking military assets like this? One Talren officer asked quietly. A nearby human technician overheard while reconnecting damaged systems on the Mercer's command deck. Without looking up, she answered simply, because those people can't replace themselves. The statement hit harder than any battlefield speech. Outside, the Dominion fleet seemed to realize the same terrifying truth. The humans would sacrifice ships, resources, themselves, but not civilians, which meant the refugees were no longer leverage. They were the line humanity would kill over. A sharp alarm suddenly erupted across the Mercer's bridge, new contacts entering the system. The tactical display flooded crimson. More Dominion warships emerged beyond the debris field in massive coordinated formations. Reinforcement fleets called from nearby sectors after the human reactivation signal spread. Heavy carriers, siege cruisers, planetary assault platforms, at least 70 additional warships. Several refugee crew members visibly lost hope at the sight. Even Lyra felt her stomach tighten. Then she looked toward the human ships. No panic, no scrambling confusion. The Black Watch merely altered course slightly while nearby human craft repositioned with eerie precision. It looked less like reacting to reinforcements and more like accounting for weather changes. The Judicator transmitted calmly across open channels. Additional hostile assets confirmed. Then, after a brief pause, civilian evacuation priority remains unchanged. The Dominion reinforcements attacked immediately. Massive bombardment waves crossed the battlefield in overlapping patterns designed to overwhelm the human defenses through sheer volume. The darkness of space vanished beneath streams of plasma and kinetic fire, and the humans drove straight into it. Lyra watched in disbelief as smaller human vessels intentionally entered impossible firing lanes to disrupt enemy formations before they could stabilize targeting solutions. Human interceptors moved with terrifying aggression, not trying to destroy entire warships outright, but surgically crippling engines, weapons, and communications. Every disabled Dominion ship became another obstacle blocking the fleet behind it. The battlefield itself was being weaponized. Then the Black Watch did something even stranger. The vessel broke away from the main engagement entirely and accelerated toward the densest cluster of refugee ships instead of the enemy. "What are they doing?" Lyra asked. Her answer arrived seconds later. The Black Watch opened along its underside. Not weapons bays. Docking corridors. Dozens of armored evacuation craft launched outward simultaneously toward damaged civilian transports throughout the convoy. Human soldiers began physically boarding refugee ships and moving civilians out in organized waves while the battle escalated around them. One live feed opened automatically on the Moses Bridge again. A human marine stood inside an overcrowded refugee corridor helping elderly civilians into evacuation harnesses while explosions thundered somewhere deeper in the ship. "Easy now," the marine said calmly to a terrified child gripping his armored arm. "You're okay. We've got you." The child stared up at him with wide silver eyes. "Are the monsters coming?" The marine glanced briefly toward distant gunfire echoing through the corridor. "No," he answered softly. "We got here first."
This is why HFY stories hit so hard. Humans protect people first.
Something inside Lyra shifted hearing that, because he had not said it with arrogance. He said it like a promise. Then the battlefield changed again. A Dominion siege carrier near the outer edge of the system suddenly stopped firing. Its enormous hull rotated slowly away from the engagement while energy readings climbed sharply across every sensor array. The tactical officer went pale. "Commander," Lyra looked toward the display and felt cold spread through her entire body. The carrier was charging a stellar lance. Not for ships, for the refugee convoy itself. The weapon was massive enough to vaporize everything within thousands of kilometers in one shot. "They are going to erase everyone," someone whispered. Across the battlefield, human ships reacted instantly. For the first time since arriving, the Black Watch abandoned rescue positioning entirely and accelerated toward the siege carrier at full burn. Every nearby human vessel followed. No hesitation, no defensive regrouping, just immediate violence. The human voice aboard the Black Watch returned across all frequencies, stripped now of every trace of calm professionalism. "You are targeting civilians after intervention declaration," it said. The entire system seemed to go silent around the words. Then came the response. Not angry, not loud. Worse, Dominion Command Authority is now condemned. A new signal erupted across deep space immediately afterward. Priority read, unlimited escalation authorized. And somewhere far beyond Khepri Drift, something enormous answered back. The stellar lance continued charging. Even through the armored hull of the Mercy of Talren, Commander Lyra Vey could feel the vibration rolling across space itself as a Dominion siege carrier prepared to fire. The weapon's growing energy field distorted nearby debris into glowing arcs while radiation warnings screamed across every civilian system in the convoy. If the lance discharged, 200 refugee ships would vanish instantly, along with everyone inside them. The Dominion commander understood exactly what the threat meant now. The refugees were no longer military targets. They were bait. Kill enough civilians in front of the humans, and maybe the monsters coming out of deep space would hesitate. Maybe. The Black Watch accelerated harder. Its engines burned so bright they carved silver scars through the darkness as the vessel drove directly toward the siege carrier alone, outrunning the rest of the human fleet by a terrifying margin. Lyra stared at the tactical display in disbelief. They can't reach it in time. No one argued. The distance was impossible. Even the Black Watch could not cross the firing line before the Stellar Lance completed charging. Then another transmission arrived. Not military. Civilian. Every refugee screen throughout the convoy suddenly displayed the face of a human woman seated inside the Black Watch's command deck. She looked exhausted beyond words. One side of her forehead bled freely beneath flickering emergency lights while distant alarms thundered through the bridge around her. Yet her voice remained steady. "This is Captain Elias Ward of the Human Systems vessel Blackwatch," she said calmly. "All civilian ships begin emergency separation protocols immediately." Lyra blinked. The captain looked far younger than she expected. Not mythic, not terrifying, just tired. Behind Ward, human crew members moved through smoke-filled corridors with brutal efficiency, some visibly injured while still operating tactical systems. One officer was manually reconnecting damage controls with burned hands, while another shouted evacuation vectors through sparks raining from the ceiling overhead. The humans looked breakable. That somehow made them far more frightening. Captain Ward continued speaking. "The Dominion vessel is preparing a saturation event. We will attempt interception." Attempt. Not guarantee. Not promise. For the first time since humanity arrived, uncertainty entered the room. A Talren officer stepped closer to Lyra and whispered quietly, "Commander, they know they won't survive this." Before Lyra could answer, the feed shifted violently as another impact struck the Black Watch somewhere off-screen. Emergency lights flickered crimson across the bridge. Ward barely reacted. Instead, her eyes moved briefly toward another display before returning to the transmission. "There's something your people need to understand," she said. Her tone changed slightly then. Not softer, older. Humanity did not disappear because we lost wars. The bridge fell silent around Lyra. Ward's gaze never left the camera. We disappeared because the galaxy became comfortable watching civilians die. The words landed like physical blows. In every age, Ward continued quietly, someone always had a reason. Territory, stability, resources, security, necessary losses. She shook her head once. Eventually we realized something dangerous. Another explosion rocked the Black Watch. Still she kept speaking. If people can learn to ignore suffering long enough, extermination starts sounding practical. Behind her, one of the human officers suddenly shouted something off-screen. Ward glanced toward the tactical feed. For the first time, real emotion crossed her face. Not fear, resolve. The moment your convoy activated those old protection codes, she said, every human system still listening received the same message. Lyra felt her throat tighten. "What message?" she whispered, though Ward could not hear her. The captain answered anyway. Someone asked for help.
Wow, that line is simple, but it means everything in this story.
Silence swallowed the bridge. Outside, the Stellar Lance reached critical charge. The siege carrier's weapon now burned like a newborn sun pointed directly at the convoy, and the Black Watch was still too far away. Then the human captain did something unexpected. She smiled, not confidently, not heroically, just tired acceptance. "The rest of the fleet won't reach you in time," Ward admitted calmly. "So we will." The transmission cut instantly afterward. A second later, the Black Watch's reactor output exploded off every sensor in the system. "Commander," the tactical officer shouted, "their drive core is overloading." Lyra stared at the display. The human ship was pushing itself beyond safe operational limits. Entire sections of the vessel glowed white-hot as the engines began tearing apart under impossible acceleration. "They are going to destroy their own ship," someone whispered. No. Lyra suddenly understood. The humans had already accepted that outcome. Across the convoy, civilian channels erupted into chaos as refugees realized what they were witnessing. Thousands of terrified survivors began transmitting live feeds outward through emergency networks across nearby sectors. Entire worlds started watching. The Black Watch surged forward like a missile fired by its own crew. The siege carrier fired. A colossal beam of white energy erupted across space toward the refugee convoy. and the Black Watch turned directly into its path. The collision lit Khepri Drift brighter than a star. For one impossible second, the human vessel disappeared completely inside the stellar lance as the beam swallowed it whole. The convoy screamed in terror. Then the beam bent, not deflected, dragged sideways. The Black Watch was physically forcing the stellar lance off course while disintegrating inside it. Alarms exploded across every Dominion channel, because something else had just entered the system. Something enormous enough to eclipse entire sections of the battlefield. And when the first sensor reading finally resolved, even the humans aboard nearby ships stopped speaking. At first, the new arrival did not look like a ship. It looked like a moving horizon. The massive object emerging from hyperspace beyond Khepri Drift dwarfed everything around it, so large that entire debris fields vanished beneath its shadow as it crossed into real space. Ancient armor plating stretched across kilometers, a hull scarred by impacts from wars older than most civilizations. Hundreds of human vessels moved around it in disciplined formations like escorts orbiting a mobile continent. Then the identification signal reached the battlefield. Human Civil Defense Authority. Sol Intervention Fleet. The Dominion fleet broke instantly. Not tactically, psychologically. Several Vorak warships attempted blind emergency jumps despite unstable gravity conditions. Others simply shut down weapons and drifted powerless through the battlefield as if surrendering to inevitability itself. Because every surviving Dominion commander understood the truth now. The Black Watch had never been the rescue force. It had only been the first responder. Meanwhile, at the center of the battlefield, the stellar lance continued tearing through space in a widening arc of catastrophic energy. The Black Watch still burned inside it, the human vessel now little more than collapsing silhouette wrapped in white fire. Yet somehow it continued holding the beam away from the convoy. Lyra stared at the tactical feed in disbelief. No ship should still exist in there. A nearby human technician answered quietly without taking his eyes off the display. Black Watch isn't trying to survive. The words hit her harder than she expected. Outside the viewport, pieces of the human vessel were visibly breaking apart beneath the pressure of the stellar lance. Entire armor sections vaporized while engine fragments spun away glowing red-hot into darkness. Still the ship held the beam. Still it refused to move. Then the great human fleet opened fire. The response was not chaotic vengeance. It was systematic annihilation. Human warships spread across the battlefield with terrifying precision, isolating Dominion vessels into fragmented kill zones before dismantling them piece by piece. Escape vectors vanished beneath interdiction fields. Communications collapsed. Weapon systems died under coordinated strikes launched with machine-like efficiency. The Dominion had spent years behaving like predators. Now they were being processed. The massive human flagship at the center of the fleet did not even target enemy vessels first. Instead, it deployed colossal shield arrays around the refugee convoy while hospital carriers flooded into civilian space. Protection first, destruction second. Human priorities never changed. Across the mercy of Talren, exhausted refugees watched the battle unfold through open broadcasts while human evacuation teams continued carrying civilians toward stabilization corridors. Medics treated injured children beside armored marines preparing for combat redeployment. Engineers restored atmosphere to shattered decks while warships outside ripped apart an empire. Humanity somehow made compassion look terrifying. Then the impossible happened. The Black Watch moved. Inside the stellar lance, the dying human ship rotated slowly toward the Dominion siege carrier one final time. Captain Elias Ward's voice returned across every frequency in the system, broken by static, weak with pain, but unmistakably calm. Civilian casualties, she coughed once as alarms screamed behind her. Prevented. The bridge feed flickered briefly, revealing shattered consoles and fires consuming entire sections of the Black Watch's command deck. Several human crew members were still standing at ruined stations despite obvious mortal injuries. Nobody aboard was attempting evacuation. They had stayed intentionally. Ward looked directly into the transmission camera one last time. Then she smiled again. Small, tired, human, worth it, she whispered.
No lie, this part really hurts. She knew what would happen.
The Black Watch detonated its drive core. The explosion did not expand outward normally. The overloaded reactor collapsed inward first, dragging the stellar lance and the Dominion siege carrier into the implosion together before releasing combined energy back into space all at once. The resulting shockwave tore across Khepri Drift like the birth of another sun. When the light finally faded, the siege carrier was gone. So was the Black Watch. Silence spread across the battlefield. Not victory cheers, not celebration. Silence. Then something unexpected happened. The refugees began transmitting. Not panic, not fear, stories. Across emergency channels, civilians from the convoy started broadcasting everything they had witnessed since humanity arrived. Human Marines shielding children with their own bodies. Engineers repairing failing life support while under fire. Medics treating strangers before themselves. A single ship diving into extinction-level firepower to save people it had never met. The entire galaxy watched those broadcasts. And for the first time in generations, nobody could pretend they had not seen civilians abandoned to die. The remaining Dominion ships surrendered within the hour, not to avoid destruction, to escape what humanity would become if the slaughter continued. Days later, as repair operations spread across the shattered convoy, Commander Lyra Vey stood inside one of the restored observation halls aboard the Mercy of Talren and watched human crews working outside the station hull. Even now, after the battle ended, the humans repaired civilian ships before military vessels. A nearby refugee child pressed against the viewport beside her. "Commander," the girl asked softly, "why did they come for us?" Lyra opened her mouth, stopped, then looked toward the stars beyond Khepri Drift where hundreds of human rescue ships still guarded the convoy like silent sentinels. At last, she understood the ancient beacon, the old laws, the hidden stations buried across forgotten space. Humanity had never stopped listening. Not really. While the rest of the galaxy learned to calculate acceptable losses and strategic sacrifices, humans had built an entire civilization around one terrifying belief. If someone, somewhere, was still crying for help, someone should answer. And far out in the darkness beyond Khepri Drift, more human response signals were still arriving.
If you enjoyed this story, drop a like and tell me your favorite human moment below. And trust me, more insane HFY stories are coming soon.